Well, that looks better. Oh my. Here, we can make sure you get enough volume. We do. All right, I don't know. I have to go back a little tiny bit. And the light a little more forward, I think. I'm not sure. Is that... Oh, there. That's much nicer. Ah, I can see everybody. You can see me. Hi. Are you... It's time again. It's 1:30. Are you there? Yeah, it's Alison Arngrim, and I'm in my living room again. Still. I just did an interview today, Hollywood Confidential radio show, and as the man said, she wears a different bonnet every day. And I do try to wear a different bonnet every day. And so today I have this one because I'm trying a little green outfit today. Thought it'd be pretty. Good. Yes, everyone's joining on. Hi, everybody. Oh, yes, there you are. You've been sending me pictures wearing your bonnets. That's awesome. This looks so cool. So we're still doing Little House on the Prairie. Yes, this is the third book in the series where they're going into Kansas, deep into Kansas. And it's about to get, a little controversial because they are in Kansas and they are in a very, very disputed territory because in the 1800s, as you may know, many of these settlers who were told, oh yeah, Homestead Act, good, yeah, it's great, go, totally go, move right over there, it's fine. Were actually being sent out and moving to areas that were completely still Native American land. The government had written various treaties and told the Indians that this is yours, we're taking this from you, but we're giving you this, we're giving you that. And there was a whole chunk, especially in Kansas, that was still owned and operated by the Native Americans. And the government had told them, yeah, fine, no, you totally don't have to move, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then at the same time said, yeah, it's completely cool to move there. So a lot of people jumped in their covered wagons and went zipping across the country, and they did not have a map. There were no lines, no fences, they did not have a compass, and they went, like the Ingalls, well, this is a lovely spot near the creek. Build a house here. Oh, look, there's an Indian encampment on the hill. Well, isn't that nice? And Ma has said several negative things about Native Americans, that she does not like them, that she is scared. And Laura has said, but if you don't like them, why did we move here? Ma? Why, Ma? So Laura knows that they're totally on Native American land, and it's a problem. And now there's going to be a bit of a confrontation, because today's chapter is called Indians in the House. Now, pay attention, because I know people think that, was Laura Ingalls has animosity toward the Native Americans? Ma does, but Laura tells a very interesting story here of total strangers dropping by, but her reaction versus Ma's reaction versus Pa's reaction is like, wait, what? That's not what I thought was going to happen. Just saying. Indians in the house. Now remember, they finally got a door so that people couldn't just walk in. Early one morning, Pa took his gun and went hunting. He had meant to make the bedstead that day. He had brought in the slabs when Ma said she had no meat for dinner. So he stood the slabs against the wall and took down his gun. He hadn't made the bed yet. He finally made a floor. Finally. They're not on a dirt floor, and they have like a railroad. So it's good, because rain. Jack wanted to go hunting too. His eyes begged Pa to take him, and whines came up from his chest and quivered in his throat till Laura almost cried with him. Wolf, doggy, wants to cry. No. Pa chained him to the stable. No, Jack, Pa said. You must stay here and guard the place. Because there were like 50 wolves there the other night. It was scary. Then he said to Mary and Laura, don't let him loose, girls. Poor Jack lay down. It was a disgrace to be chained, and he felt it deeply. He turned his head from Pa and would not watch him going away with the gun on his shoulder. Pa went farther and farther away till the prairies swallowed him and he was gone. Laura tried to comfort Jack, but he would not be comforted. The more he thought about the chain, the worse he felt. Laura tried to cheer him up, to frisk and play, but he only grew more sullen. Both Mary and Laura felt that they could not leave Jack while he was so unhappy. So all that morning, they stayed by the stable. They stroked Jack's smooth, brindled head and scratched around his ears, ear scratch, and told him how sorry they were that he must be chained. He lapped their hands a little bit, but he was very sad and angry. So the brindle bulldog is sulking, basically, because he couldn't go hunting and go play. Jack's a good dog. We like Jack. Glad he didn't drown. His head was on Laura's knee, and she was talking to him when suddenly he stood up and growled a fierce, deep growl. The hair on his neck stood straight up, and his eyes glared red. Uh-oh. Laura was frightened. Jack had never growled at her before. Rawr! Then he looked over her shoulder. She looked over her shoulder where Jack was looking, and she saw two naked wild men coming, one behind the other on the Indian trail. Now, they had on little Indian stuff, but they weren't wearing 1800s pants, so she was, they ain't wearing what I'm wearing. Mary, look, she cried. Mary looked and saw them too. They were tall, thin, fierce-looking men. Their skin was brownish red. Their heads seemed to go up to a peak, and on the peak was a tuft of hair that stood straight up and ended in feathers. Their eyes were black and still and glittering like snake's eyes. Well, if you shave your head, then it's going to look like it does up to a peak. There you go. She's never seen anyone. Well, frankly, she's never seen anyone other than Ma and Pa and Mary and Carrie and her grandma and grandpa. They lived in the middle of nowhere in the big woods, and now they're out living on the prairie. So she didn't really see a lot of people. The first people other than her immediate relatives she's seen were Mr. Edwards. And like a shopkeeper. That's like it. She's met like 10 human beings, basically, counting baby Carrie. And now these two people show up who don't look like anybody she's ever seen in her life. So, yeah, she's gonna freak out. Tall and thin and fierce, they came closer and closer. Then they went out of sight on the other side of the house. Laura's head turned, so did Mary's, and they looked at the place where those terrible men would appear when they came past the house. Indians, Mary whispered. Laura was shivery. There was a queer feeling in her middle, and the bones in her legs felt weak. She wanted to sit down, but she stood and looked and waited for those Indians to come out from beyond the house. The Indians did not do that. It's fascinating how she describes panic. She realized she has seen these people she does not know, who don't look like anyone she knows, and she's only heard that they are dangerous, and now they're at her house. The feeling in her middle and the fact that her legs are going out, she's describing, without saying, Laura was terrified and having an anxiety attack and panicking. That she's having an anxiety attack and panic. It's very clever, very clever. All this time, Jack had been growling. Now, he stopped growling and was lunging against the chain. His eyes were red, and his lips curled back, and all the hair on his back was bristling. He bounded and bounded, clear off the ground, trying to get loose from the chain. Laura was glad that the chain kept him right there with her. Jack's here, she whispered to Mary. Jack won't let them hurt us. We'll be safe if we stay close to Jack. They are in the house, Mary whispered. They're in the house with Ma and Carrie. Then Laura began to shake all over. She knew she must do something. She did not know what those Indians were doing to Ma and baby Carrie. There was no sound at all from the house. Oh, what are they doing to Ma? She screamed in a whisper. Oh, I don't know, Mary whispered. I'm going to let Jack loose, Laura whispered hoarsely. Jack will kill them. Pa said not to, Mary answered. They were too scared to speak out loud. They put their heads together and watched the house and whispered. He didn't know Indians would come, Laura said. He said not to let Jack loose. Mary was almost crying. I think he knew, and that's probably why he said leave the door. Laura thought of little baby Carrie and Ma, shut in the house with those Indians. She said, I'm going in to help Ma. But that is pretty brave for a 9-year-old. There you go. She ran 2 steps and walked a step. Then she turned and flew back to Jack. She clutched him wildly and hung on to his strong, panting neck. Jack wouldn't let anything hurt her. We mustn't leave Ma in there alone, Mary whispered. She stood still and trembled. Mary never could move when she was frightened. Oh, Mary, you're no help. Poor Mary. Well, they're scared and silly. They're little girls. What are they supposed to do? Laura hid her face against Jack and held on to him tightly. Then she made her arms let go. Her hands balled into fists and her eyes shut tight, and she ran toward the house as fast as she could run. She stumbled and fell down, and her eyes popped open. She was up again and running before she could think. Interesting, she's describing the fight or flight response. That she tried to run the house and she panicked and she ran, and now she's angry. She's got fist balls. She's like, now she's going to fight. She's got full of adrenaline, and she's totally, it's fascinating that she's described the fight and flight response so accurately. Mary was close behind her. They came to the door. It was open, and they slipped into the house without a sound. The naked wild men stood by the fireplace. Ma was bending over the fire, cooking something. Carrie clung to Ma's skirts with both hands, and her head was hidden in the folds. Laura ran toward Ma, but just as she reached the hearth, she smelled a horribly bad smell, and she looked up at the Indians. Quick as a flash, she ducked behind the long, narrow slab that leaned against the wall. The slab was just wide enough to cover both her eyes. If she held her head perfectly still and pressed her nose against the slab, she couldn't see the Indians, and she felt safer. But she couldn't help moving her head just a little, so that one eye peeped out, and she could see the wild men. And this is her hiding behind the slab for the beds. There, go hide out. First, she saw their leather moccasins. Nobody she knew wore moccasins. Then their stringy, bare, red-brown legs all the way up. Around their waist, each of the Indians wore a leather thong, and the furry skin of a small animal hung down in front. The fur was striped black and white, and now Laura knew what made that smell. The skins were fresh skunk skins. So you see, she was saying that the Indians smelled. They were wearing skunks. Hello, what are you going to do? A knife like Pa's hunting knife and a hatchet like Pa's hatchet were stuck into each skunk skin. They're like a little purse, basically. If you wear a skunk purse, 1800s, it's hard to get the smell out. The Indians' ribs made little ridges up their bare sides. Their arms were folded on their chests. At last, Laura looked again at their faces, and she dodged quickly behind the slab. Their faces were bold and fierce and terrible. Their black eyes glittered. High on their foreheads and above their ears, where their hair grows, these wild men had no hair. But on top of their heads, a tuft of hair stood straight up. It was wound around with string, and feathers were in it. Now, this is the style that the Native Americans in that part of Kansas were wearing that year, and that is that they had the little loincloths with the little skunk purse for their knives, and they shaved their heads back to the back and did a ponytail thing with the feathers. And this was the style in 1870s Kansas of that tribe. And like I said, Laura had seen like 8 people in her life, so this had to have been mind blown. When Laura peeked out from behind the slab again, both Indians were looking straight at her. Her heart jumped into her throat and choked her with its pounding. 2 black eyes glittered down into her eyes. The Indian did not move. Not one muscle of his face moved. Only his eyes shone and sparkled at her. Laura didn't move either. She didn't even breathe. The Indian made 2 short, harsh sounds in his throat. The other Indian made one sound like, "Ha!" Laura hid her eyes behind the slab again. We don't know what they're saying. Wonder what they're saying. What are they saying? Oh, look, there's a kid hiding behind the table. She heard Ma take the covers off the bake oven. She heard the Indians squat down on the hearth. After a while, she heard them eating. Laura peeked and hid and peeked again, while the Indians ate the cornbread that Ma had made. They ate every morsel of it and even picked up the crumbs from the hearth. Well, Ma was a very good cook. Ma stood and watched them and stroked baby Carrie's head. Mary stood close behind Ma and held on to her sleeve. Faintly, Laura heard Jack's chain rattling. Jack was still trying to get loose. When every crumb of the cornbread was gone, the Indians rose up. The skunk smell was stronger when they moved. One of them made harsh sounds in his throat again. Ma looked at him with big eyes. She did not say anything. The Indian turned around. The other Indian turned too. And they walked across the floor and out through the door. Their feet made no sound at all. Ma sighed a long, long sigh. She hugged Laura tight in one arm and Mary tight in the other arm, and through the window they watched the Indians going away, one behind the other, on the dim trail toward the west. Then Ma sat down on the bed and hugged Laura and Mary tighter and trembled. She looked sick. "Do you feel sick, Ma?" Mary asked her. "No," said Ma. "I'm just thankful they're gone." Laura wrinkled her nose and said, "They smell awful." "That was the skunk skins they wore," Ma said. Then they told her how they'd left Jack and had come into the house because they were afraid the Indians would hurt her and baby Carrie. Ma said they were her brave little girls. "Now we must get dinner," she said. "Pa will be here soon, and we must have dinner ready for him." "Wow. Mary, bring me some wood. Laura, you may set the table." "Okay, priorities." She's like, "Yes, we had 2 complete strangers wearing skunk purses hanging out in our house. But, you know, they had the cornbread, and they left. And now we are going to chill out and make dinner, and that's that. There you go. Well, Ma rolled up her sleeves, and she washed her hands and mixed cornbread. Got time to make more cornbread, because the Native Americans just ate it all. Mary brought the wood, and Laura set the table. She set a tin plate, a knife and fork and cup for Pa, and the same for Ma, with Carrie's little tin cup beside Ma's. Then she set tin plates and knives and forks for her and Mary, but only their one cup between the plates. Ma made the cornmeal and water into 2 thin loaves, each shaped in a half circle. She laid the loaves with their straight sides together in the bake oven, and she pressed her hand flat on top of each loaf. Pa always said he did not ask for any other sweetening when Ma put the prints of her hands on the loaves. Oh, that Pa, silver-tongued devil going, oh, Ma, you touched the cornbread. Laura had hardly set the table when Pa was there. He left a big rabbit and 2 prairie hens outside the door and stepped in and laid his gun on his pegs. Laura and Mary ran and clutched him, both talking at once. Oh, what's all this? What's all this? He said, rumpling their hair. Indians? Ah, so you've seen Indians at last, have you, Laura? I notice they have a camp in a little valley west of here. Did the Indians come to the house, Caroline? He seems rather calm. He does not seem particularly upset that Indians have visited. He is not saying, oh, heavens, red devils, or that the terrible Indians should not be there. He just said, well, you wanted to see Indians, and now you have. So, you know, there you go. Yes, Charles, 2 of them, Ma said. I'm sorry, but they took all your tobacco, and they ate a lot of cornbread. They pointed to the cornmeal, and they made signs for me to cook some, and I was afraid not to. Oh, Charles, I was afraid. You did the right thing, Pa told her. We don't want to make enemies of any Indians. Okay, so, can we talk? Because, here you go, many people have said the discussion of Indians. Because remember, this takes place in the 1870s, when things were not good between white settlers and Indians, when we were at war, when things were not happy. And it was written in the 1930s, when many white Americans did not like their Native American co-citizens. In fact, 1930s, let's think about it. You still had the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The 1930s, things were still really rough for Native Americans. They did not really get the rights that they eventually got till really it was the 60s and 70s that there was a movement. And they certainly did not have any casinos. Things were rough. So the tone, But wait, Pa just said, we don't want to make enemies of any Indians. So where is the part that the Ingalls are enemies of the Indians? Because it seems to be the opposite. Completely. Right there. There you go. They wore fresh skunk skins, said Ma. And that was all they wore. Must have been thick while they were here, Pa said. It was, Charles. We were short of cornmeal, too. Oh, well, we have enough to hold out a while yet. And our meat is running all over the country. Don't worry, Caroline. But they took all your tobacco. Never mind, Pa said. I'll get along without tobacco till I can make the trip to independence. Now, the real Michael Landon in the 1970s would not have gotten on without his Marlboros and his cigarettes for a long period of time. But you see, Charles Ingalls is much more moderate. If he has an occasional pipe of tobacco, he's fine. He's not like totally hooked on the thing. You know, it's good to know. He can hold out. The main thing is to be on good terms with the Indians. We don't want to wake up some night with a band of the screeching devil. Oh, he stopped. Laura dreadfully wanted to know what he had been going to say, but Ma's lips were pressed together, and she shook a little shake of her head at Pa. Come on, Mary and Laura, Pa said. We'll skin that rabbit and dress the prairie hens while that cornbread bakes. Hurry, I'm hungry as a wolf. So Pa is bringing up the possibility that if one is making enemies of the Native Americans, that there are some of them who might decide to show up and kill you. And he and Ma rightly said, let's not tell the children that, okay? So we'll do that. They sat on the woodpile in the wind and sunshine and watched Pa work with his hunting knife. The big rabbit was shot through the eye, and the prairie hens' heads were shot clean away. Sorry to all the vegans in the house, but remember, they eat everything they kill, and they kill everything they eat. They're like, and the furry heads were shot clean off, and the rabbit was shot in the eye. Oh, but she's actually bragging about how Pa was a clean shot. He did quick, which if you're gonna do it, that's how you do it. And they never knew what hit them, Pa said. So he's merciful. There you go. Laura held the edge of the rabbit skin while Pa's keen knife ripped it off the rabbit meat. I'll salt this skin and peg it out of the house wall to dry. It will make a warm fur cap for some little girl to wear next winter. But Laura could not forget the Indians. She'd said to Pa that if they had turned Jack loose, he would have eaten those Indians right up. Pa laid down his knife. Did you girls even think of turning Jack loose? He asked in a dreadful voice. Laura's head bowed down and she whispered, Yes, Pa. After I told you not to? Pa said in a more dreadful voice. Laura couldn't speak, but Mary choked, Yes, Pa. For a moment, Pa was silent. He sighed a long sigh like Ma's sigh after the Indians went away. After this, he said in a terrible voice, you girls remember always to do as you're told. Don't you even think of disobeying me. Do you hear? Yes, Pa, Laura and Mary whispered. Do you know what would have happened if you'd turned Jack loose? Pa asked. No, Pa, they whispered. He would have bitten those Indians, said Pa. Then there would have been trouble. Bad trouble. Do you understand? Yes, Pa, they said. But they did not understand. Would they have killed Jack? Laura asked. Yes, and that's not all. You girls remember this. You do as you're told, no matter what happens. Yes, Pa, Laura said. And Mary said, Yes, Pa. They were glad they had not turned Jack loose. Do as you're told, said Pa, and no harm will come to you. Pa has met the Indians. He's talked about going. He's met the Indians. He's all over. He knows that they're on their land. He knows it's all very shaky. He knows which tribe it is. He knows what's going on. And he knows that they're not really supposed to be there. And that if they play it cool, and when the Indians show up, say, hey, what? Yeah, some cornbread. Fine. You want some tobacco? We got tobacco. And just chill out and don't start anything. You don't want nothing. Don't start nothing. It will be fine. That this group of Native Americans, this particular tribe, is not out attacking people randomly. But they were coming over to see, well, who lives there? And let them have tobacco and the cornbread. But if you sick your dog on them, well, then they're going to defend themselves against the dog. And other members of their hunting party might take a dim view of that arrangement. And that's when wars would start between the settlers and the Indians. Hello. So Paul was responsible. He's like, no, we are not starting anything. We are not starting anything with the Native American tribe on the hill. We're just going to sit here, I'm going to eat our cornbread, and that's that. So that was smart. Paul was very smart, but it's fascinating because it's still a kid's book, and she's doing it from the perspective of an 8-year-old. She doesn't fully get it. It's fascinating because an adult reading this knows exactly what's happening, but a kid's like, what? The parents keep saying, shh, because they might, and they go, shh, don't say it. And the children, what? What are they going to? They might kill us. They might kill us. That's an actual option. And they're like trying to not say that in front of the children. And Laura's going, I don't know why they're sad. Why are they so upset? So it's the interesting two positions of the very young child and the parents trying to protect the kids, trying to make a go of it in this new country with wolves and Native Americans and wild animals and strange people they don't know and blizzards and prairie fires and constant risk of death. And they have small children and they're going, it's fine. Here, have some cornbread. Eat your dinner. There's rabbit. There's lots of rabbit. Have some rabbit. It's good. It's good. Can you imagine living like that? I'd be terrified. Fresh water to drink. Well, that's good. Well, they have a creek. They're going to build a well. Yes, good idea. Pa had made the bedstead. Oh, thank heavens. P had smoothed the oak slabs till there was not a splinter on them. Then he pegged them firmly together. 4 slabs made a box to hold the straw tick. Straw tick. That's the Back then, mattresses stuffed with straw. That's a straw tick. Across the bottom of it, Pa stretched a rope, zigzagged from side to side and pulled tight. You know, I've seen those kind of cots. I've seen them at, like, Little House on the Prairie museums where they have, like, the beds set up with a string. And I've seen them at camping places, just get the zigzag cord on the wooden slats and stuff. Not too comfortable, but there you go. One end of the bedstead, Pa pegged solidly to the wall in a corner of the house. Only one corner of the bed was not against a wall. At this corner, Pa set up a tall slab. He pegged it to the bedstead. As high up as he could reach, he pegged 2 strips of oak to the walls and to the tall slab. Then he climbed up on them, and he pegged the top of the tall slab solidly to a rafter. This thing is attached. The bed is not only attached, it's attached to the rafters in the ceiling. This bed is like a built-in. It is part of the house now. And on the strips of oak, he laid a shelf above the bed. "There you are, Caroline," he said. "I can't wait to see it made up," said Ma. "Help me bring in the straw tick." She had filled the straw tick that morning. There was no straw on the high prairie, so she had filled it with dry, clean, dead grass. Ugh, but I guess it's probably nice dead grass. It was hot from the sunshine and had a grassy, sweet smell. Oh, that sounds pretty good then. Pa helped her bring it into the house and lay it in the bedstead. She tucked the sheets in and spread her prettiest patchwork quilt over them. At the head of the bed, she set up the goose feather pillows, and spread the pillow shams against them. Oh, she had pillow shams. Okay, like people do the fancy beds and they have a little completely useless. These people have no running water. They have no bathroom. They just got a roof, but by God, she's got pillow shams. She's probably got a dust ruffle on that bed, too. Pillow shams. On each white pillow sham, 2 little birds were outlined with red thread. She's still got decor. Then Pa and Ma and Laura and Mary stood and looked at the bed. It was a very nice bed. The zigzag rope was softer than the floor to sleep on. There you go, perspective. The straw tick was plump with the sweet-smelling grass, and the quilt lay smooth, and the pretty pillow shams stood up crisply. The shelf was a good place to store things. The whole home had quite an air with such a bed in it. It was a very fancy bed. That night, when Ma went to bed, she settled into the crackling straw tick and said to Pa, "I declare, I'm so comfortable, it's almost sinful." Right? I mean, they've been sleeping on the floor, and I said they got no running water, they just got a roof, they just got a floor, they're living in totally primitive conditions. He's like, ooh, a bed, an actual bed with a mattress. I don't know, might be too decadent. Mary and Laura still slept on the floor. Oh well, but Pa would make a little bed for them as soon as he could. He had made the big bed, and he had made a stout cupboard and padlocked it, so the Indians could not take all the cornmeal if they came again. Pa tends to think of things after. It's like after the wolves come, he builds a door. After he drops a log on Ma's foot, he says we should use little ramps to do the log thing. And now that 2 Indians just showed up and could have killed everyone if they chose to, and took his tobacco, he went, "I think I'll build a cupboard with a lock on it." Good, Pa. A little slow, but good. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Now he had only to dig a well, and then he would make the trip to town. Well, he has to make a bed, he has to dig a well. He actually has like 89 things to do. He must dig the well first, so that Ma could have water while he was gone. Next morning, he marked a large circle in the grass near the corner of the house. With his spade, he cut the sod inside the circle and lifted it up in large pieces. Then he began to shovel out the earth, digging himself deeper and deeper down. Mary and Laura must not go near the well while Pa was digging. Even when they couldn't see his head anymore, shovelfuls of earth came flying up. But they were right. They were like, it's dangerous. You know, baby Carrie fell in that hole. We all know. So they said, stay away. As the last spade flew up and fell in the grass, then Pa jumped. His hands caught hold of the sod, then one elbow gripped it, then the other elbow, and with a heave, Pa came rolling out. "I can't throw the dirt out from any deeper," he said. I mean, how do you dig a well by yourself? He had to have help now. So he took his gun and rode away on Patty. When he came back, he brought a plump rabbit, and he had traded work with Mr. Scott. Now, we heard about him earlier. Mr. Scott would help him dig this well, and then he would help dig Mr. Scott's well. like the Mr. Edwards house thing. Ma and Laura and Mary had not seen Mr. and Mrs. Scott. Their house was hidden somewhere in a little valley on the prairie. Laura had seen the smoke rising up from it, and that was all. At sunup next morning, Mr. Scott came. So this is now like the 12th human being she's met in her life. He was short and stout. His hair was bleached by the sun, and his skin was bright red and scaly. He did not tan. He peeled. Now, as she said to Pa once, "Oh, you're all brown." Pa tans. Pa goes brown in the sun. And the girls wear their little bonnets and get freckles. But Mr. Scott is, well, probably like Scottish, Irish. Mr. Scott's like me. Mr. Scott goes out in the sun and turns bright red, and his skin falls off, which is pretty much, yeah, no tan. There is no tanning here. So I burst into flames if I try to get a tan. Mr. Scott, I sympathize. "It's this blasted sun and wind," he said. "Beg your pardon, ma'am, but it's enough to make a saint use strong language. I might as well be a snake, the way I keep on shedding my skin in this country." What do you think? Is he Scottish or Irish? He said, I might as well be a snake as I keep shedding my skin in this country. Or is he Scottish? Och, bones. she can't take no more. It's like Scotty. Oh, can we do that accent? I don't know. I might as well be a snake the way I keep shedding my skin in this country. Laura liked him. Every morning, as soon as the dishes were washed and the beds made, she ran out to watch Mr. Scott and Pa working at the well. The sunshine was blistering. Even the winds were hot, and the prairie grasses were turning yellow. Mary preferred to stay in the house and sew on her patchwork quilt. Mary is so boring. But Laura liked the fierce light and the sun and the wind, and she couldn't stay away from the well, but she was not allowed to go near its edge. Pa and Mr. Scott had made a stout windlass. It stood over the well. A windlass, that's a thing with buckets, it's a pulley, it's a thing there. 2 buckets hung from it on the ends of a rope. When the windlass was turned, one bucket went down into the well, and the other bucket came up. Very smart, very clever. In the morning, Mr. Scott slid down the rope and dug. He filled the buckets with earth almost as fast as Pa could haul them up and empty them. After dinner, Pa slid down the rope into the well, and Mr. Scott hauled up the buckets. Sorry, because he was digging. Now it's just like pulley, buckets. You can haul. It's all almost modern. Every morning before Pa would let Mr. Scott go down the rope, he set a candle in a bucket and lighted it and lowered it to the bottom. Once Laura peeped over the edge, and she saw the candle brightly burning far down in the dark hole in the ground. Then Pa would say, "Seems to be all right," and he would pull up the bucket and blow out the candle. Ooh, see, Laura doesn't know what they're doing. I know what they're doing. Oh, look, there he is. There he is. There's Mr. Scott with his messed up hair and his sunburned face, and there's Pa blowing out again. "That's all foolishness, Ingalls," Mr. Scott said. The well was right yesterday." "You can't ever tell," Pa replied. "Better be safe than sorry." Laura did not know what danger Pa was looking for by that candlelight. She did not ask, because Pa and Mr. Scott were busy. She meant to ask later, but she forgot. Now, Mr. Scott, he said, "It's fine." Pa's like, no, we're going to use the candle every day. We're going to check every day. One morning, Mr. Scott came while Pa was eating breakfast. They heard him shout, "Hi, Ingalls, it's sunup, let's go." Pa drank his coffee and went out. The windlass began to creak, and Pa began to whistle. Laura and Mary were washing the dishes, and Ma was making the big bed when Pa's whistling stopped. They heard him say, "Scott!" He shouted, "Scott! Scott!" Then he called, "Caroline, come quick!" Sounds like a Get Doc Baker moment. Ma ran out of the house. Laura ran after her. "Scott's fainted or something down there." Pa said, "I've got to go down after him." "Did you send down the candle?" Ma asked. "No, I thought he had. I asked him if it was all right, and he said it was." Pa cut the empty bucket off the rope and tied the rope firmly to the windlass. "Charles, you can't. You mustn't," Ma said. "Caroline, I've got to." "You can't, oh, Charles, no." Scott didn't light the candle, and he went down into the well where the gas is. So Pa's going to go save him, and Caroline is rightly terrified. I'll make it all right. I won't breathe till I get out. We can't let him die down there. Ma said fiercely, Laura, keep back. So Laura kept back. She stood against the house and shivered. No, no, Charles, I can't let you. Ma said, get on Patty and go for help. There isn't time. Charles, if I can't pull you up, if you keel over down there and I can't pull you up, Caroline, I've got to, Pa said. He swung into the well. His head slid out of sight down the rope. Ma crouched and shaded her eyes, staring down into the well. All over the prairie, meadowlarks were rising, singing, flying straight up into the sky. The wind was blowing warmer, but Laura was cold. Suddenly, Ma jumped up and seized the handle of the windlass. She tugged at it with all her might. The rope strained and the windlass creaked. Laura thought that Pa had keeled over down in the dark bottom of the well, and Ma couldn't pull him up, but the windlass turned a little, and then a little more. Pa's hand came up, holding to the rope. His other hand reached above it and took hold of the rope. Then Pa's head came up. His arm held on to the windlass. Then somehow he got to the ground and sat there. The windlass whirled around, and there was a thud deep down in the well. Pa struggled to get up, and Ma said, Sit still, Charles. Laura, get some water, quick. Laura ran. She came hurrying back, lugging the pail of water. Pa and Ma were both turning the windlass. The rope slowly wound itself up, and the bucket came up out of the well, and tied to the bucket and the rope was Mr. Scott. His arms and his legs and his head hung and wobbled. His mouth was partly open, and his eyes half shut. He's out. Look, Ma and Pa pulled the unconscious Mr. Scott out of the well. Like, probably just in time. Like, he could have died. Pa tugged him onto the grass. Pa rolled him over and flopped. He flopped where he was rolled. Pa felt his wrist and listened at his chest, and then Pa lay down beside him. Pa took his pulse. See, Pa is smart. He's been to the city. He took his pulse, and he listened to his chest for a pulse and a heartbeat. That's pretty good. He's breathing, Pa said. He'll be all right in the air. I'm all right, Caroline. I'm plumb tuckered out is all. Well, Ma scolded, I should think you would be, of all the senseless performances. Senseless performances. My goodness gracious, scaring a body to death, all for the want of a little reasonable care. My goodness, She covered her face with her apron and burst out crying. That was a terrible day. I don't want a well, Ma sobbed. It isn't worth it. I won't have you running such risks. Okay, Ma's now finally having a meltdown. Having two complete strangers, Indians, come in her house and eat the cornbread. No, 50 wolves. She did not freak and have a meltdown. She held it together and cooked for the Indians. Now, Scott almost died, and Pa took the risk of almost dying to save him. It's enough. But Ma's like, nope, that's my limit. I'm done. And she is now crying. She's hysterical. Ma's finally snapped. And I am amazed that the poor woman held it together this long. I would have flipped out ages ago. Mr. Scott had breathed a kind of gas that stays deep in the ground. It stays at the bottom of wells because it is heavier than the air. It cannot be seen or smelled, but no one can breathe it very long and live. Pa had gone down into that gas to tie Mr. Scott to the rope so that he could be pulled up out of the gas. Very educational. Science here. When Mr. Scott was able, he went home. No kidding. Before he went, he said to Pa, You were right about that candle business, Ingalls. I thought it was all foolishness, and I would not bother with it. But I found out my mistake. Well, said Pa, where a light can't live, I know I can't. And I like to be safe when I can be. But all's well that ends well. Pa says that to everything. The dog almost drowned. They almost got eaten by wolves. Broke Ma's foot. All these horrible things happen. He goes, all's well that ends well. They almost suffocated to death. But notice that. Mr. Scott was Mr. Fancy full of himself. Mr. Fancy Pants. I don't need a candle. Ugh, ugh. So there's gas in the well. I'm a man. I can take it. And Pa's like, we're gonna be safe. We're gonna be like, OSHA guidelines here. It's a work site. We're gonna put a candle in the well, make sure there's oxygen. And Mr. Scott was like, bah! and then he almost died. So Pa was right. Pa was right. No, you put a candle down the well. So you've heard the expression canary in a coal mine? That's what that is. Is the canary breathing? So yes, if you're in the habit of digging giant holes, you really do want to put a candle down there because you don't want to die. And so be smart like Pa, not dumb like Mr. Scott. Just saying. Poor Mr. Scott. So after all of that, poor Mr. Scott, all's well that ends. So Pa rested a while, I guess. He had breathed a little of the gas, and he felt like resting. But that afternoon, he raveled a thread from a tow sack, and he took a little powder from his powder horn. He tied the powder in a piece of cloth with one end of the tow string in the powder. He's making a bomb. He's got a fuse. What is he doing? He's made a fuse. Come on, Laura, and I'll show you something. He went to the well. Pa lighted the end of the string and waited till the spark was crawling quickly along it. Then he dropped the little bundle into the well. In a minute, they heard a muffled bang, and a puff of smoke came out of the well. That will bring the gas, Pa said. When the smoke was all gone, he let Laura light the candle and stand beside him while he let it down. All the way down in the dark hole, that little candle kept on burning like a star. So next day, Pa and Mr. Scott went on digging the well, but they always sent that candle down every morning. See, Pa's really smart. Not only the candle, he made a little bomb, a little gunpowder and a fuse, and the explosion clears the gas. Pa is ahead of his time. He's very smart. There began to be a little water in the well, but it was not enough. The buckets came up full of mud. Oh, we're starting. And Pa and Mr. Scott worked every day in deeper mud. In the mornings, when the candle went down, it lighted oozing wet walls, and candlelight sparkled in rings over the water when the bucket struck bottom. Pa stood knee-deep in water and bailed out bucketfuls before he could begin digging in the mud. One day, when he was digging, a loud shout came echoing up. Ma ran out of the house, and Laura ran to the well. Probably terrified by now. "Pull, Scott, pull!" Pa yelled. A swishing, gurgling sound echoed down there. Mr. Scott turned the windlass as fast as he could, and Pa came up, climbing hand over hand up that rope. "I'm blamed if that's not quicksand," Pa gasped, as he stepped onto the ground, muddy and dripping. "I was pushing down hard on the spade, when all of a sudden it went down the whole length of the handle, and water came pouring up all around me." "A good 6 feet of this rope's wet," Mr. Scott said, winding it up. The bucket was full of water. "You showed sense in getting out of that hand over hand, Ingalls. That water came up faster than I could pull you out." Then Mr. Scott slapped his thigh and shouted, "I'm blasted if you didn't bring up the spade." Sure enough, Pa had saved his spade. So, in addition to dying from gas, you can also, quicksand. Quicksand, you can go in the quicksand, sink, and drown. So Pa could have also smothered and drowned in quicksand, but luckily got out. And, being Pa, he saved the shovel. He didn't leave his shovel either, even though he was risking his life. In a little while, that well was almost full of water. A circle of blue sky lay not far down in the ground, and when Laura looked at it, a little girl's head looked up at her. When she waved her hand, a hand on the water surface waved too. That's some clear water. The water was clear and cold and good. Laura thought she'd never tasted anything so good as those long, cold drinks of water. Pa hauled no more stale, warm water from the creek. He stayed away from those mosquitoes and the malaria down there, too. He built a solid platform over the well and a heavy cover for the hole that let the water bucket through. Laura must never touch that cover, but whenever she or Mary was thirsty, Ma lifted the cover and drew a dripping bucket of cold, fresh water from that well. Now, see, he's safety first. Again, he's built a cover and a thing so that baby Carrie doesn't fall in a hole, like on the show. And that Laura, because Laura is notorious for going, look, what's down there? Oh, look, I can see myself. Ah! And she would totally jump in. So he has a safety thing. And wolves, wild animals, neighboring Native Americans. Nobody can just like jump in the well. So they now have a real well. Whew, I'm relieved. So they finally have a clean source of water, and they now have a roof and a floor and a door that locks. So wolves, and a locking cupboard, so when the Indians do come, they can't just randomly take all the cornmeal and tobacco. There's a lot. As someone said, I honestly thought quicksand would be a bigger... Yes, didn't we all grow up watching like Gilligan's Island and all those like jungle movies, and we all thought that quicksand was something we would have to deal with in our adult life? And not so much. But my God, Pa Ingalls had to deal with quicksand. It totally happened. So I was very impressed that there was quicksand. So we're going to do this again tomorrow. Tomorrow at 1:30. What are we doing? It's... Thank you. I was getting stressed out that these people had no water. We're going to... Oh, Texas Longhorns. Cowboys. I think we're going to have cowboys. Yes, more strange men. Strange men, as Laura says. Except these strange men are neither Scottish nor Native American. They're going to be cowboys. I wonder, because it's the 1800s, and we always think of westerns and cowboys. On Little House on the Prairie, we don't really have cowboys. So finally, cowboys. I'm so excited. So bonnets. I am waiting for another shipment of, get myself comfortable here, of bonnets. I got like 2 or something. This is one. But the nice people in Walnut Grove are shipping me some more bonnets, so I will put that on the little store. For those who are going, Square. The Square, you know the thing I put it on my phone and I go zip with the credit card. Well, there's an online store. It's Loose, Loose, Loose Gravel. If you look for Loose, you should be, I'll put the link up, but it's Loose Gravel at Square, and it says, not your mother's mercantile. If I guess if you Google not your mother's mercantile, Loose Gravel, Square, just come up, but I'll put the link up. And I got books and things. And I will have more bonnets. I will have more bonnets soon. But I have books and stuff. And you can order things. And yes, autograph. People say, can you? Yes, I can autograph anything. I even, the candles, I like autograph the box. I can autograph anything. I will autograph bonnets, books, photos, whatever the heck on there you want. But there's a little note space, and you can say, I want this autograph to Susie, Billy, Jimmy, whoever the heck I'm autographing it to. You know, happy birthday or something. I don't know. But put whatever you need, and then I can do that. And I try to mail things out quickly. As you see, do you see a staff? We do not have a staff. I see no personal assistant. No. I have a husband and a cat and a sock monkey. I have a stuffed sock monkey and a cat and a husband. And there you go. Bob, my husband, has been declared an essential worker because he is working on the thing that's going to be the people mover at the airport. So he's involved with a construction company at the airport, and that's called infrastructure, which is fancy. And infrastructure is essential. So he's still going in, but I mean it's like masks and gloves, and he's in a building, it's locked down, no other people. It's like him and like just a couple people, and they're like 20 feet apart. But he's going in. So he's not here all day to sit around and help me mail bonnets out. He comes home at night. I try to get stuff out, so it takes me a couple of days because I don't have like a team of people assembling packages. It's just me going, get this in this, addressing stuff. But I get them out, and then also I am limiting the amount of time I go. I'm pretty much here. I am severely limiting my outside activities because there's nowhere to go. I'm really not going anywhere. Once, like a week, I will go to the post office with my beautiful masks. I will have to show you my lovely masks my friend Brenda made. They're very pretty and very effective. And the gloves, and I have the hand sanitizer and the wipes and the thing. So like, and my post office, they have 6 foot apart markings where everybody stands. Very safe. So food run, post office run, and that's like it for days at a time. I'm just here, where it is safe. And I wash my hands many times, and I have hand sanitizer and wipes and masks and gloves and all of that good stuff. And there you go, because that's what you do. Like you put a candle, when you're digging a well, you put a candle down the well. And when you think that the Native American tribe next door might be visiting, you lock up the dog. These are things that you do to stay safe. You build a big wooden door when you have 50 wolves in your yard that might eat you. You have to take precautions and remain safe. And so that's what we're doing now. At least I don't have 50 wolves to worry about. So, but we wash our hands and we wear our little masks and we wear our little gloves and we do our thing and we stay here as much as humanly possible. But absolutely, if you order some junk, I'll get it to you. And I'll totally sign it and we'll make it happen. And yeah, I'm still doing them Cameo things. You want to order it, Cameo.com. I swear, half the cast of Little House on the Prairie is on there now. Dean Butler read Farmer Boy, and I'm going to read this one soon. We're going to On the Banks of Plum Creek, where Nellie Oleson shows up for the first time. I have a wig. Also, Miss Beadle shows up. So Charlotte Stewart, who is Miss Beadle on the show, shall join us at some point. We will love that. That's all my, things. But what does it get? Wear your mask. Don't be like Pa and put it on after the... Yes, don't wear your mask after the pandemic. Pa would wait and go, I guess I'll wear a mask now, Caroline. So be safe and wash your hands. And May 9th. So some of you know that on May 9th, I was going to go to New York. And I was going to do my little show and people buying tickets go, oh, no, we can't go to New York. What do? Well, modern technology. There's this thing, Stage It, and so my buddies at Spin Cycle New York put this thing together. And on May 9th, I am doing a show. Right here, babe. We're going to set up a whole little theater. It'll be lovely. I'm going to set it up and I will be performing and doing a stand-up show. I will be doing comedy here in my living room, and you can buy tickets to it. And then I will be in your living room. And it's going to be May 9th. It's going to be May 9th, just like the show is going to be. I'm just going to do the show, but I'm just going to do it here. And then you'll be able to log on and buy tickets and watch it from home. I know. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But that's what we're doing. So, here on this page, or you can go to Spin, S-B-I-N, Cycle, which is C-Y-C-L-E-N-Y-C for New York City. Spin Cycle, New York City. SpinCycleNYC.com. And you can read all about it. Oh, look, look at you, Sarah. Sarah posted the link. See, Sarah knows. And you can go, and it's happening. More stuff like that. I'm going to be doing so many crazy things like that. This, of course, our bonnet-headed readings are always free every day at 1:30. Me and other guest members will be reading Little House on the Prairie books every day here in this space. You guys are awesome. This is really fun. I feel like I'm not alone in the house. I feel like you're all with me. This is really cool. So thank you. Stay safe. Don't be don't be Paul. Get that candle down. Don't be Mr. Scott. Put the candle in the well. Wear little masks. Wash your hands. And I'll see you tomorrow.